Paging Neil Matthews. Paging Neil Matthews. We have a new patient for X-ray. Hello, I've paged our host, Neil Matthews. He will be right with you. In the meantime, please find a seat, take a deep breath, and relax. Welcome to Season 19 of Other People's Shoes, called X-ray. We're exploring what we call sight beyond sight, taking a deep look into the unseen damage and aspects of people's lives. We hope you leave today with encouragement, advice for facing similar challenges, and even a perspective shift. After hearing from our guests, we hope they give you the sight beyond sight. Here's our host, Neil Matthews.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really excited that you've chosen, I say it so often, but you've chosen to hit that like sideways triangle button, you know, the one that says play underneath. Never take that for granted, because someday, one day, there may not be a button to hit play. Maybe we'll just think, Alexa, play, and she'll start playing it. I don't think Alexa's going anywhere. I have some friends that say she's awful, she's evil. I'm like, listen, really good at keeping track of things. She's really good at starting timers. When I'm feeling sad, she's really good at playing that really happy song I want to hear. She's also, I've tried it a few times. She's really good at also playing Other People's Shoes, which is always exciting to me. You know what is not so exciting to me? Going to the doctor. I don't know about anybody else. It's still this awkward 75-page document that I have to sign my whole family history up for. Somehow at the end of it, I feel like there should be more than a sucker or a sticker or a treasure chest of trinkets that you get to choose from if you were really good. They need to come up with something better is all I'm saying. So hopefully the doctor that we have in the house today will help us feel healthy and free and all the things associated with health. No HIPAA violations were violated, by the way, in the recording of today's episode. So help me welcome in our friend, Dr. Danisha Keating.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And I am a doctor in psychology, not that kind of doctor of medical, but hey, let's not violate HIPAA regardless, because no one needs that happening.
So help me with your name, because this is important. I always want to make sure I say it right, and I was so ready to get going on this new platform that we're trying. This is your house, but we're being welcomed in. It's a new thing for us. So help us with your name. Yeah,
it's Danisha. Like, the funny part is there's moments that I'm like, am I pronouncing it right? Because my name is very unique. But Dr. Danisha Keating. And that's who I am.
Danisha, do you know what it means?
My dad said he made it up from the Hebrew language, and it means Dan's daughter, but when you actually look at the Hebrew language, it does not mean that. Ish and Isha are totally two different meanings. When I looked up now through Urban Dictionary, or however you say it, they actually say it's something different. It's called dark judgment, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty judgmental sometimes, so I've had to learn to scale that back. It is not a name that actually has a meaning, and in every language, it's kind of a different meaning. It literally says you can make up your own meaning. I'm like, cool, that sounds great.
What a unique opportunity, though, if you think about it, to redefine yourself and redefine your name. Because like Neil means champion, which is cool. But I felt like as a child when I found that out, thank you to the internet Netscape Navigator, it made me feel like I then needed to go out and find or win said championship once I found that out. My middle name, Alan, actually means handsome, and I've struggled with that. I look at the guys on the TV and the movies, and I'm like, that guy, my wife says, is really cute, and he's handsome. I don't see the picture doesn't match. I have to flip the cards back over. I have a friend, his name is Neil, and he told me, he's like, my name means champion. He goes, I don't really feel like a champion today. I was like, oh no, Neil. I know. Neil and I definitely said he felt that way. It is unique that I could kind of create my own meaning to my name, which is different. Not a lot of people can do that. It definitely, for a long time, just because of how I kind of grew up, being associated with my father's name was one of those things that started to become shameful. And it was not fun because it was like, oh, I'm his daughter. But then if you really looked at the word, it's Isha or Ish in Hebrew meant wife. So I was wife of Dan. And it was like, ugh, that's icky. And that's where getting to see that it could be something different was like, okay, maybe I don't have the same name definition as somebody else who has Danisha or believes it's something else, but I can create it as my own, which has been a lot of fun. And I think I've done a okay job at that. Yeah, there's something special about being able to recreate yourself, I think. Yes. Well, help us with this as we get going and rolling. Is there a specific style of shoe that you love to wear the most that makes you feel maybe empowered or makes you feel like, okay, when I put these on, really feel like I can do more?
I'm not a name brand girl, but whenever I put on like boots, like doesn't matter what type of boots it is, it doesn't matter if they're from Target or Walmart or off of Amazon. There's something about boots. I'm already tall. I'm 5'8", so I'm like 5'9", 5'10" when I put boots on. But it makes you feel taller and you walk different. So boots are always fun to wear.
Is there like a color of boots just to help us? Are there zippers? Are they lace up?
The zippers would be the best. The color has to match the outfit because you can't wear tan boots in all black. It just looks weird. The zip boots are the best boots. But if it has a heel, it doesn't have a heel. It could be a cowboy boot. Each boot kind of changes your personality a little bit. Maybe you're feeling strong today and you want to stand up really tall. You'll wear a higher boot that has a heel on it. So that way you're standing taller. If you want to just kind of have more of a lazy boot, you would wear like an UGG type boot. Always has to match your outfit because if it's the wrong color, it's not going to be great. It looks a little odd.
I know something about shoes matching your outfit. Yeah. Usually the woman is the one that is making the man wait in the car. There's a Brad Paisley song, even Waiting on a Woman. That's not true in
I
our
love
house.
that song. That sounds really funny.
That's not true in our house. No, it's
mostly not true for most houses.
Yeah, it's mainly me. What shoes do I want to wear today? Because there's so many shoes. And sadly,
there's too many shoes.
There is. And sadly, no shoes were purchased or received at Christmas time. So clearly, all these months later, Santa still, maybe they got lost.
Santa done did you wrong, man.
Santa did me dirty wrong. Even. Yeah, some would say.
Did not get me the shoes you asked for.
So help us with this, because again, in this series that we're talking about, this X-ray series is really a weird origin story. I was working at a body shop. Every single day, it seemed like without fail, I would say to somebody, Mr. Customer, Miss Customer, hey, we're not sure how long it's going to take to fix your car. Because right now we're seeing the damage on the outside of the bumper that's smashed in. There's stuff behind that bumper that we can't see. And I jokingly said to somebody one day, I said, it'd be cool if I had like X-ray vision, or if I could see sight beyond the sight that we're seeing. And I kind of froze for a moment, and I pulled out my phone and I said, X-ray vision, sight beyond sight, hidden damage. And I wrote it down. And then the guy, I think, was afraid that something had happened to me because I literally just like froze like a statue. And he came over and he kind of like touched me, and it kind of like woke me up, which, by the way, don't ever touch people in public. Side note, don't do that. That's not wise. If they're on the ground, okay, maybe. But if they're standing straight, don't touch them. So he touched me, and I kind of like woke out of this like trance, and I said, hey, what's up? And he said, what was that? And I said, oh, sorry. I had a moment where I needed to write that down because that was really awesome. What did you need to write it down for? And I said, this podcast is called Other People's Shoes. And I said, trying to think of new themes for the season. And I said, that just became a theme. And he said, that right there, I helped with that. And I said, yes, sure, you helped with that. More me, I did most of the work. But in that,
he's part of it.
Yeah, he's part of it. Exactly. But in that, when we talk about this idea of X-ray, or this idea of hidden damage, or this thing that people can't see,
there's so much. Oh my gosh. I think really a lot of the hidden damage comes from the secrets that we're told to keep in our family. More vocal about it now in my 30s than I've ever been, because I've learned that I shouldn't have to be ashamed of where I've come from. Being that I was in foster care, being that my parents were abusive, there was a lot of these moments where I've been in communities where they're like, oh, we don't talk about that. We don't share about that. We keep that hidden. There's anxiety and depression and panic that comes from what we've grown up in, or how we've had to kind of survive and not really have things. A lot of us have things handed to us. It's very rare, but we sit and we look around and we assume that everyone's good because they have a smile on their face. We assume people had a really good Christmas. What they don't know is what we don't tell them. We had a horrible Christmas. Maybe everybody was sick. Maybe you couldn't afford anything. Maybe you lost your house during Christmas. We don't know what that looks like. Tend to just put a smile on and we fake it, and we hope that nobody can see the layers of dysfunction that are underneath. I was telling somebody recently, I used to misunderstand me being someone who had anxiety and depression and panic, that was my real person. That was my real person of who I was inside. It wasn't this put together person, or I was fake going forward being happy. It took me a while to kind of work through some of those things. It all was layered. Like you said, it's the hidden damage that was done. And then we learned to kind of mask it with some stuff because people, maybe they're uncomfortable talking about depression and anxiety, or maybe they're uncomfortable with talking about family issues, or we all assume it wasn't that bad. I always hear people say that, like, oh, it wasn't that bad. You have to be exaggerating. It's like, well, the fact that I was in foster care tells me that that wasn't the truth. Even I learned to downplay that and say, well, it wasn't really that bad. And then growing older, I learned, well, people don't just get put into foster care for little things. But the majority of them are being put into foster care because it was that bad. I got really good at masking so people didn't see how bad it was, to the point of recently a friend of mine was like, I knew you when you lived in your car. I knew you when you were homeless for 5 years, but I didn't know what you were going through. I had no idea. You never said it. You came in with a smile on your face. You learned how to mask really well. And it is hard to tell when someone says, how are you? And you're like, oh, good. I learned that the majority of the time, people were just saying, how are you, as a pass-by hello, not a actual like, hey, how are you doing? And I'm going to stand here in this conversation.
I think the obvious question maybe is what led to foster care.
I don't want to speak for other people because it is different per person. The majority of people.
Let me help. So
yeah.
I say this with love and respect. I don't care about other people. I care about you.
Right. I just always plug that because it is important to know that like why I was put into foster care is not the same reason why someone else is going to be put into foster care. And that's okay. For me, there was a lot of neglect. There was a lot of physical, emotional, mental abuse that was going on. And it was very apparent. The neglect, I would say, and the abandonment was probably the biggest ones. It was just layered. And it was one of the days it literally was like, where's your parents? And it's like, both of them are gone. And then both of them were like, yeah, we know the other one's not showing up for our kid. It's that person's problem now. It was just no accountability from either parent and no desire for stepping in and wanting to change the situation. But it was multifaceted of neglect, abuse, like abandonment. When I say that, like literal, like not seeing your parent for a couple of days, not having food to eat, not having food in the house at all, fend for yourself. And you could be 8 years old or 15 years old. Sometimes it was at 4. Like I actually was able to get my foster file where they notate everything for people. And I found that all of these issues went back to when I was 2 years old. Then my parents would move us again. And then it would be like, okay, well, now we moved to another location. Nobody knows. And then it just started all over. 422 pages that they have notated. That's only what they've reported. There's only about 35 pages that we can actually see that are not blacked out and redacted by the county. It's so crazy that there's still a whole nother file missing. Was multifaceted of why I ended up into foster care. And that's different for everybody else. That was what happened with me.
That's what I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're not, and I'm sort of playing here a little bit, you're not like a government asset, as far as I know, right? You're not like a super secret spy.
No. God, I'd make so much money if I was.
You're not like a CIA operative. I mean, not that you could tell us anyway. You're not?
No.
Okay. What I don't understand, though, is what you just shared is why, when it involves you and your upbringing, things that happened to you and the awful monsters that raised you, and I use the word raised very loosely here, gave life to you. That's probably the better phrasing. Why is stuff redacted?
Yeah, that's the question of the year. There are laws, and this is my understanding. What this little piece of paper said is you can't share this with anybody unless you go to a judge and say, can I please share what I have? The county and the states have said, here are things that we want blacked out. That one would reveal people's addresses or names. It would be a danger to them to reveal. I'm like, understandable. The other stuff, my assumption is that it's stuff that made them look bad, not doing what they needed to do in the moment as an organization with the government. It could have been things of, well, I don't want like an anonymous report by somebody else saying, I don't want my name listed. I don't want this listed. But if it makes it look more, from my understanding from people in the field, there are things that they have taken out to withhold information so that way there is not a lawsuit on their hand. My guess is that it was something there that would have revealed that they did not step in time, that they should have stepped in and kind of just didn't, or that they didn't do their job to the fullest extent. And then the rest of it's legitimate, like people's addresses or names or things like that, organizations that stepped in to help, people who made anonymous reports on my family, stuff like that, like where it would give a little too much away of like who it actually was, like a family member or a teacher at the time or a neighbor, if it says we lived next door. But what was interesting when I looked through that is that I did see those things. I did see who it was as a teacher. I did see who it was as the neighbor, because it literally said the neighbor reported. It's like, I know what neighbor that was. We talked about this. All the other stuff, it's like I would be interested to understand why so much is blacked out. And that's when someone I know looked at it and said, I think it's more that it would have been stuff to hold the county accountable for not stepping in. And that's what they're like, oh shoot, if we gave her this, she could technically sue us. Now, what my job would be is if I wanted that information, I would have to go through the courthouse, ask a judge, and each file is a different county. So I'd have to go to 3 different county judges and say, please let me see all this information. And they would ask the question, why do you need it? It's like, well, I want to sue you guys. They're not going to open it. They can at any point say, no, you cannot. And then it still is, I have to get a judge approve to say, yes, you can share this with an attorney. Yes, you can share this with somebody else. You cannot, like, I can't go around posting about it to share more of my story. Like, I could try and I could get sued by the state that I live in or the county that I live in. So it's wild. It's wild to me that they redacted so much.
It's not just wild, it's dumb, I think.
Yeah. There's a lot that it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And we can say that. Bad to say that. It's very frustrating for someone to piece their story together and this be the only resource that they have to be able to piece it together, and then they can't. So that's frustrating. And it makes me angry for people who were relying on this to be able to understand what happened to them.
I get the standpoint of protecting perhaps
Right.
people that filed complaints. If you're a teacher in most states, you're a mandatory reporter. If it's a neighbor that maybe didn't want to have their story revealed. Again, if somebody is coming from a heart of or a standpoint of trying to help, to intervene, to help protect, to make people aware that you're being neglected and left and all these things, to me, it would make me think, why would kids come forward if they know that they're not going to get help?
It gets so much worse than that, though.
Absolutely. There's a lot of tentacles, if you will. And I mean, I get the county wanted to protect their donkey.
Right. It makes it hard, I think, for a lot of people to step forward, not just the person who's being abused. It's wild to me. There's no other word that hits weight. And I'm trying to find one where I'm just like, it's disgusting. It's stupid. I feel like it's an immature thing sometimes when you're just like, oh, you didn't want your name being shown. But I was paraded around to like foster homes and homelessness. Like nobody wanted to stop for a second and say, well, if we redact all this, then they can't see that she actually needs help. She can't see that she actually needs to not be put back into this situation, which I was not, but my siblings they were put back in, and they said it wasn't safe for me, but suddenly it was safe for other kids to be put back in this environment. Like I sit back and I'm like, there are things that they redacted on purpose so that way they could do this agenda of what they wanted. In my state, they have something called reunification at all costs. Their goal is to reunify foster youth back with their families, regardless of if it's safe or not. They're just going to attempt and see what happens. They're going to do it at full force just to hit that number of 75% reunified or 85% reunified. Nobody looks at the file. So it's like, well, why do we have a file if nobody's going to look at it? Why do we have, okay, so it's just in case to say, did you do the bare minimum? I actually spoke to an attorney. He even said, not a lot I can see from this. They do have to investigate by just following up on the initial call, but they don't have to fully investigate and come to a conclusion that is safe for the children. They could say, well, I thought it was safe by just leaving them. Well, how did you come to that conclusion? Well, I followed up on the phone call. It didn't seem out of sorts. That's wild. But then you redact everything. And so someone who has gone through this and they're relying on this file for information because maybe they have family like I did, where it was everyone didn't know. Everyone kind of had parts of the story or believed whoever the parent was on their side of the family. They all thought it was the other guy, the other bad guy, which was the other parent. They don't know the full story. They don't know the full situation. And even in the 35 pages that are actually not redacted, I was able to see a ton. That's crazy to me, that all of that, I could still see how much I was set up for failure as the person who was supposed to be protected, how my parents were both protected more, that they were given all this support financially and emotionally and physically. And we were just expected, like, there was moments in my file where they said, like, Danisha needs to do better. Danisha needs to give them a chance. And I was being abused in multiple ways. So it's like, what? How did I become the problem? When I'm the kid in the situation, there were notes that were indicative of like, Danisha was the issue. Danisha
was the problem. If Danisha helped clean the house more and took care of the kids, the parent wouldn't have struggled. And I'm like, I was 15 at that point. But before that, I was 8 and 9 and 10 and 5. How is this my fault? That is what happens when a system looks at a family and says the only that matters is the parent, not the child. And that is across the US at this point, across the United States. We have heard a lot of former foster youth say, I was not protected. My parent was. My parent could have 1,000 chances and still get me. I mess up and I'm moved homes. I make a mistake. I cried too loud and I was moved into a group home at 10. It's crazy to sit back and go, yeah, that makes sense, because it doesn't. Seeing how much is redacted doesn't make sense. Seeing how they handled things, there's theory and then there's practice. Their theory sounds great, and in practice, nobody does anything.
Did the system fail you in your mind?
100%. They failed me. They failed hundreds of thousands of children across the board. In my county alone, they fail every single kid that has gone through that system, and they failed my siblings. And they failed my parents, because it's going to sound weird because people are like, but don't you hate your parents? It's like, no. If someone maybe bopped them up across the head and was like, cut it out, this is how you are to be a good parent, maybe they would have changed. I don't know. What it did do was it enabled two very toxic parents who were master manipulators, who literally had things thrown out from the courthouse that should have never been thrown out of the courthouse. Sexual abuse allegations thrown out. Well, he looks like a good gentleman. Or a knife to the throat, like, not to get too detailed, but you should not have that. Like, if someone is a danger to themselves and to children, they should not be around them, yet they threw it out. Well, they had a bad day. You don't pull a knife on someone and call it a bad day. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, these are adults, not children. These are not someone who's learning how to handle emotions. These are people who should already know. 100% the system failed. They failed to protect me. They failed to protect my siblings, and they failed to really recognize the situation. The hardest part is people will look at the file and say, yes, they failed you, follow it up with, but there's nothing you can do. They, in their eyes, did the quote unquote best they could. And it's like, no, they did not. They did the bare minimum. And even then, that's not enough.
It's tough in situations like this. It's hard when kids are involved. I think, who's the grown-up in the room? There has to be a grown-up in the room. And I guess the big question that I keep kind of coming back to in my mind is, there was not only you, there were how many others? Your siblings go. That's what I mean by the how many others.
There were a total, at that point, there was 8 of us. Before, there was 11. The older ones had to be the adults.
There's 8 of you, as I'm showing on the screen. There's 8 of you.
Right.
Of the 8 of you, how many in your mind are, and this is your opinion, I know you can't speak for them, that's why I'm asking for your opinion. How many of them are thriving, functioning adults?
Surprisingly, almost all of us. 11 total. At that time that I was placed into foster care, there was 8 of us who were also placed in different homes. Some of it through family, some of it through the foster care system. I mean, we've all had like mental health issues, like anxiety, depression, that is rooted in trauma, which is a whole different world when you realize like you're not actually crazy. You went through crap. You have to deal with it. At a functioning, I would say we all are functioning, but we have all been able to sit back a little bit and say, okay, am I going to move forward from this or not? And not all of us have been able to. In all honesty, we were taught, me and one of my siblings were talking about this recently, is feel like we're not as close to the pain that we went through. We feel like there's distance, that we can actually safely talk about what we went through and it not unravel us. However, there are other siblings that we have talked to, or even family members who we have talked to. They come undone with, I didn't realize it was that bad, or it feels like it was just yesterday. And it was like, yeah, the last time that we were with our parents was 10 years ago. And then the other parent, I was 13. I'm 35 now. Whatever that is. Like, I don't do math well. So over 20 years. Some of the younger ones are like, I never remembered being with that parent. So I don't know. I just know what you guys have talked about the last 10, 15 years. But I would say, like, there's still things that are wounds that each of us have to deal with, and each of that looks different. We all have jobs, we all participate in society, like we all do all those things. But let me tell you, like, it looks different on a scale of, oh, okay, you're still living in it, which is very real, as if it happened yesterday. And then there's some of us where it's like, hey, that actually happened 15, 20 years ago. And you see the verbalized difference of how we verbalize it, how we act, how it may or may not crush someone, because either you're really close into still of it, like literally it felt like it happened yesterday, versus someone where I'm at more of on the healing journey is, I can look back and recognize how far I've come with anxiety and depression as well as annoyance. Like I look at stuff now and I'm like, okay, that's what's wrong. Now I'm going to go use this for good to change it for somebody else versus just sitting here and crying over like, how dare they fail me, which is not a bad thing to do. But that's usually earlier in the journey versus 15, 20 years after it happens when you've known what happened. If you just discovered 15, 20 years after you were abused on something and something went a different way and you just discovered that, there's a mourning process that happens and that you're allowed to go through. That shouldn't be like you knew the information for 20 years and you're still sitting in it the same way. But we all process differently.
I can't even understand how 8 kids still continue to be put back home potentially throughout the time. There's got to be a stopping point. There's got to be a savior that comes in, a caseworker, a coach, somebody, an advocate. I think that's the word I was looking for. Advocate that really comes in and says, no, it stops. It stops here. And it sounds like there were some along the way.
But there was no like
amplified enough for them to be heard.
Right. And that happened unfortunately when I was put into foster care. It was 2006. In 2015 things went down because the siblings were put back. I was immediately homeless. It's not safe for you to go back. Then I turned 18 and I was still a senior in school, and then my caseworker's like, you figure it out, go find a place to live, you're out. And I'm like, what? Fast forward to 2015, more crap happens. I'm the one who takes them in. So there's 5 at that point. And in my 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 500 square foot apartment, I have 5 siblings living with me who were from the ages of 12 to 19, sorry. That was when the stop, we're done with this now. But it was me doing that again, like me as the child, little mini adult. I was 24 at that point, trying to figure my life out. And then being like, no, we're done with this. We're not doing foster care. We're not doing caseworkers again. We're not doing this whole route that failed us the first time. We're in the same county. It's going to fail us again. Multiple times. That was when I came in and I said, that's enough. We're done. We're not doing this again. It should have been, like you said, it should have been a coach. It should have been a principal, caseworker, an advocate being like, the parents are done at this point. Like, we need to figure out how to set these kids up for success. And that didn't happen.
So if you don't take your siblings in, what do you think happens to their life?
They would have gone into the foster care system again. In that opinion, they would not have been supported, especially the older ones. They would have been immediately homeless. The 3 younger ones would have been separated. This is what the caseworker told me. We will not put them together. They're teenagers. We will separate them. They will most likely end up in a group home. They will most likely not get placed into a foster care because people don't want older kids as foster parents. Most of them think that teenagers are hard. They just don't want to deal with them. They would have ended up in group homes. Statistically, they could have ended up in a lot of different places like jail. They could have ended up in some pretty crappy situations like prostitution or homelessness. Survey the homeless population. They see like 90% of them have gone through the foster care system. That's not accidental. When I started researching and really digging into research, I was like, this was where I was headed. And a person would be like, no, don't go that way. Don't go that way. That's not the route for you. And my route was going to be continued homelessness. I was homeless for 5 years. I lived in my car for a year. I bounced around 33 different addresses. So in my head, when I saw what my siblings were up against, I was like, it's going to be best case scenario what I went through. Best case. Worst case, they're going to end up in gangs. They're going to end up on the streets. They're not going to be placed. And that was what the caseworker at that time was like, girl, if it's not you, it's the system. And at 24, I was like, okay, how do we make this 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom a home? At that time, this one caseworker who was pivotal said, well, there's this closet that I thought that was a bedroom. This is the bedroom. And then there's this other room that looks like a bedroom. And it was the front room. And she said, I see a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom. What do you see? And I was like, a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom? And she's just like, right. And she wrote it down that it was a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom. She closed the case. And if it wasn't for her, their whole goal was reunification. It didn't matter if it was a parent or a sibling or a grandma. They just wanted to close the case and walk away. And they were able to do that. But it didn't set me up for any success at all. It actually made it a lot harder. It was better than the alternative. Instability of housing. Because they're teenagers, they're going to get moved a lot. That was worse to me than being uncomfortable for myself.
Take me back to 8-year-old you. What advice would you give her?
Oh, dear 8-year-old me. Remember 8-year-old me, honestly. Like that's not to like sound dark, but it's true. Like 8-year-old me, I'm trying to remember where we were even at. I would say hold on. It does get better. You didn't do anything wrong. That was the voice in my head, was that I could have prevented a lot of things and it wasn't mine to prevent.
I was the child. And I think a lot of other people need to hear that when they have been abused, is that it was not their fault. They did not cause it. I really wish someone had said, Danisha, this is not for you to hold. This is your parents' choice to do this, and they need to change that. What I would hear repeatedly throughout my life was, well, what are you doing to help the situation? How are you making it worse? That's not how this works. It's not. I'm not being disciplined in the quote that they quote unquote air quotes that they do is like, oh, you're being disciplined. It's like, no, I was being abused. It wasn't my fault. And that's something I've really rested in this last year. I was loud enough in advocating for myself. That was something I thought I never did. And when I looked at my file, I found that I was very vocal and I thought I wasn't loud enough. It was a weird release because it like for years, I was like, if I was louder, if I was stronger in my voice, if I had fought harder, they would have listened to me. And I opened my file. In the 35 pages that you can see, it was like Danisha said, Danisha said, Danisha said, Danisha's getting aggravated because they're not listening to her. She said this verbally. They're not doing what they need to do. She's being attacked by her parents and da da da. And I sat back and I was like, I was loud. I was very loud. I wasn't the problem. It wasn't ever me to carry. And that is something I think a lot of, if we can rest in that, knowing we did all the things that we were supposed to do for an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, we were not the adult in the room. We maybe were able to really rewire our brain to understand like what we went through was not us. That was not our fault. It wasn't our inability to do something. It literally was. We did what we were supposed to. We were supposed to be the child. Even though we weren't, we were acting like adults. We were not supposed to be the adults in the room.
Do you think that younger you would believe you?
I would hope so. Probably not. Because we're wired so differently that when our brain goes into fight or flight, it is one of those things that we just ignore truth at points. And we're just like, let's just put our head down and focus. Even though all of that stuff went on, I still was able to finish school. And I think it drove me a little bit to be like, I'm not going to repeat this in multiple ways of what my family did, but also to get ready to take my siblings in. And I remembered when I was 19, I was like, it's my chance to get ready so that if this happens again, I can take my siblings in, because I didn't have that same security when I was in high school. I bounced around so much. It really did push me into the direction I went in of getting school done, getting serious. I think it really just made me like fast track being serious versus like I would have ended up where I was anyway. Took a little bit longer, the longer route, but versus with raising siblings and children that are not getting the care that they need, I think it really pushed me to like, hey, there's no game time, there's no play time. Maybe that's what I should have told myself, is learn to play. Because I did not play as a child. Like I was just like, nope, serious. Let's cook, let's bake, let's take care of kids. That's not a 8-year-old mindset.
What does life look like now?
It's really sweet. One of the sweet things with trauma comes, especially when you have trauma with multiple siblings, and I think someone needs to hear this, is there's a lot of pointing fingers. There's a lot of being mad at each other, even though we're not. It's just reflecting pain from who is supposed to take the blame to people who we think should have taken responsibility. There was a lot of moments where I sat back and I was like, man, like my siblings don't like me. My siblings don't want to have a relationship with me. For years, this year, a lot of restoring those relationships came into play. But there's been several moments where I've sat back and just saw my siblings in my house and playing with my daughter and just loving on her and just looking, and they're just like, hey, I'm grateful for what you did. And like 9 years ago, 10 years ago, those words would not have been uttered. It was, this is your fault. This is what you did wrong to us. You're the problem. You didn't do this or say this or do whatever. Like we would have been better off. Now it's, we see what you actually did and how much you were blamed for things. And I'm like, I've sat back. I'm like, hold on. Like this is the moment of just taking this in. And it is a very beautiful thing, but there is still things to heal from. And those things can take the time that they need. I don't want anyone rushing the healing, but I think I never thought I'd share my story in the way that I've been sharing it. I never thought I'd write books. Never thought I would do podcasts or do my own podcast. It is very beautiful, even when it is difficult, to walk through those moments. Very different than what I thought, in the best way possible. There are still fears where it's like, oh my God, what if CPS gets called on me? Not because I'm doing anything wrong, just because that's been my whole entire life. But then reminding myself, they don't call on people who don't do the wrong thing. They don't call on people who are taking care of their kids. They don't call on people who are just living life. They call on people when someone says, hey, this person's doing something wrong. And I have to remind myself of that. But it is beautiful to get to sit in a room that once was empty,
and full of like questions of like, why am I getting blamed for this? Why am I being singled out? Why am I by myself right now? To a moment where people are laughing in your house and then saying, hey, I see what you actually did for us. And that's a moment that you just sit back and you're like, I never thought I'd live that moment in. I never thought I would have this conversation of just them asking questions and then being able to sit on like the redemption side where it's like, oh, okay, you do see it now. So it's been very, very sweet.
Do you want to have a relationship with your mom and dad?
Oh no, that's not safe. And it's okay to say that. I have tried for years, decades really, with one parent. The other parent it's like it's not safe for anybody. And I will not put myself or my child or my family in danger of someone who's not safe emotionally, mentally, physically. But the other is I've tried and it's just there's a lot of manipulation, there's a lot of blame games still happening. And I'm like, man, it's different when you can see it's kind of sad, but somebody was with me with one of the latest conversations. I received an email of like, well, here's how all of this wasn't my fault. All of the things that I had assumed, like this parent knew of the abuse that was going on, purposely put us in the situation to be abused just to see what would happen. I assumed like I was just being dramatic. And in this email that was sent to me, it was, I knew it was happening and I just didn't do anything. I asked people if it was normal. They said no. And I just let it happen just to see what would happen and how bad it would get. And then I figured, well, they'll be fine. That's not safe to be around when someone can excuse that behavior and say, well, it is what it is. Different response of like, should have stepped in. I should have done these things. I was the adult in the room. Then I would consider slowly seeing what that would look like. But I'm 35 and I've been dealing with this since I was hardcore since I was 15. So 20 years now. Yeah, well, that's crazy. For 20 years, it's still like I'm talking to a 13-year-old as these are the adults in the room. And I'm 35 now. And I'm like, man, I've been having these same conversations since I was 15 with these adults. No, you can't talk to someone like that. No, you can't just react that way. You have to. And I'm like, I shouldn't be the adult to the parent. That's a big term I've learned recently was parentification, where the child is the adult parent to the parent. That could happen at 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way up. It is crazy to me that people have actually told me like you were wrong for not having a relationship with them. You shouldn't cut them off unless it's very outrageous things. And I'm like, yeah, I've gone through all of that. And they're like, no, you should still give them a chance. I'm like, no. And that's okay. That's my decision. If others wanted to have a relationship with them, they can. For me and my household, we're good. We're not going to invite that kind of person into our room, in our home, and say, I think maybe just simplify my statement is like, look, if you have to jump hoops mentally to say, is my kid going to be safe alone if they say this or that or do this or that, if I step out of the room, if you have to start thinking to try to mentally jump rope around like safety precautions, the person is not safe to be with. And it's okay to say, no, thank you.
I've heard it said that April is Sexual Abuse Awareness Month. Did you know that?
Yep. And May is Foster Care Awareness Month.
So kind of 2 back-to-back months of things that affect you bring about awareness for us. How would you best articulate to someone who maybe has never been neglected, never been sexually abused, never been left abandoned? How would you best try to explain to someone who doesn't have any concept of that?
That's hard because there's different levels of understanding. The best thing is the way that your parents treated you was with love and dignity and respect, and they taught you how to be a human. I didn't get any of that. I was a problem to them. I was the issue that ruined their life. And then they saw fit to just dehumanize and say, this is not a person that I care for, that I'm going to do whatever I want, whenever I want to them. And I'm going to say that it's okay. And then sit with that person as they try to process like what I went through. There have been times for the books that I've written a couple books now. So now I'm like, if you want to just kind of dig into that, you can read how it felt, kind of just like walk with me. But it actually doesn't help us by me. It doesn't help me by being like, well, here's the levels of trauma and here's the depth of that trauma and the details of my trauma that I went through. There are going to still be people who walk away and say, well, I don't understand how they can do that. And I just say, I don't either. I don't understand. But what I do know is that I'm safe now. And there are other children who are in this situation that we have to help. And we have to ask, what is our role in that? Are we a teacher where we can listen to them and report what we see? Are we a coach who has overheard them share something that we need to report and then walk them through. We need to find a counselor who's a therapist that can walk them through this that we're not equipped to do. What is our role in this happened to me, but it's still happening to other people? That's my hope. That's why I share on social media that someone who is with children or teenagers who are being abused, that they say, hey, I see the sign now. Hey, I understand why they act this way. This kid who's being just disruptive to be disruptive, there might be something going on below the surface that we can't see. But also the kid who's being really like strict with themselves, always around, doesn't really seem to have parents involved, like something might happen to them, or I need to watch out for them. Like I need to be in their corner and be that person who's willing to fight the good fight for them and not just back down because a caseworker said, we got it from here. They need to be followed up with and say like, hey, what's happening with the situation? Really what tends to happen is as I walk people through this, I say, we can't live in an out of sight, out of mind situation with abuse. It's in front of us more than we want to acknowledge and understand. And there is someone in our life that is experiencing it. Me sharing my story helps someone else not live it. I'm going to continue sharing that.
That was great. I love that. You mentioned the book, you mentioned the podcast, you mentioned all the facets that are involved in the day-to-day life of you. What's the best way someone can connect with you and maybe learn more about your story and hear more about the journey that you've been on and how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. So if you go to DanishaKeating.com, you can find my books. Everything's listed up at the top, the podcast, books, blog. I'm trying to blog again like the old days, but you can request a speaking event. You can do all those things by going to DanishaKeating.com. And you can even follow on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those things, TikTok, whatever, wherever you are being able to share. And you can always ask questions. I think that those are super important as well.
Well, Danisha, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate all that you gave. I think the big question I still have on my mind that maybe is unanswered, and it's kind of a big one. Can you forgive mom and dad?
Oh, I have.
Do you have love in your heart for mom and dad?
I have forgiven them. I love them in a different way. The love is just a little different, where I feel broken for them because I know that they've gone through things. On both sides, foster care exists. On my mom's side, it goes 3 or 4 generations back. And that breaks my heart. Worked through is that forgiveness doesn't equal reunification. It doesn't equal having a relationship. It's actually not safe for them or me to have a relationship with them. It is actually very bad. I tend to go back into panic mode, and no, I'm not at that point. Just because I've forgiven them doesn't mean I have to have that relationship. I also don't need to harbor anger toward them to say it's not an anger response for me to say, hey, they're not a safe person. It's the same situation if you get your car jacked, someone robs you, you're not going to walk up to the robber and just be like, hey, I just want to make sure you're having a good day. Like, they're not a safe person to continue pursuing. So just let it move on, walk away, set yourself up to get into a safe place and just wait. Forgiveness for me has been understanding that there's a lot of brokenness on their side, but it's not my job to go and fix that brokenness for them. That's their work to be done. And I can still live and find happiness. It's okay to have spaces that are empty. It's not comfortable with other people, other things at times, so we don't void. I'm able to say, hey, it's not safe to have my parents in my life, but that space doesn't need to be replaced with a temporary parent or someone else to fill their spot that should have been filled by my parents. But it is awkward when you at my wedding and it's like, oh, you don't have a dad or a mom walking you down. It's just you. Oh, you don't have a mother, father, daughter dance. It's like, no. But holding the void, holding that space and saying, it's okay that this is empty. It wasn't my choice to empty it, but it was my choice to stay safe. And that's okay. Forgiveness happened a long time ago. And there's moments where it still happens where I'm like, oh, I have to find out new information. What? But then it worked. Okay, but that's my responsibility to be able to say, I'm not going to pass this on.
I think that's the most exciting thing for me in your story is it sounds like, at least, that you don't harbor resentment. You're not harboring this bitterness in your heart, because I think that can wreck people. And I think it has wrecked people when they look at their life and they start to realize that, hey, there's people in our lives that we have to
100%.
Give that grace to. We have to give that ability to say it's okay and let them go. And again, I think it's powerful to not try to fill that void either.
Exactly. And there's this question that somebody asked me that I had to sit with for a really long time, because they asked me the question as like a therapist asked me and said, Danisha, when I was harboring all this anger, I want them to suffer. Like, I want them to not have people look at them and say, you did a great job as a parent. Like, I want someone to say, hey, you could have done better. My therapist at the time was like, that's not for you to be in that conversation then. And I was like, well, that's rude. But I was like, oh, okay, what I have control over is not how they respond. I could forgive them, try to have a relationship with them, and they still see that nothing is wrong. I need to understand that the only thing that I can heal is in myself. The only thing I can let go is of how that hold it has over my life. Because if I sat in this resentment forever, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have been able to focus on school. I would not be able to think forward thinking for my daughter and my husband. Like, I wouldn't have healthy relationships. I would be so in the past of like, look how I was wronged. And we see that happen all the time, where people are in their past like it was yesterday. That's where it's like, okay, what would happen if you let go of that resentment? And in that moment when I recognize with my therapist, oh, if I let go of this, I'm afraid that they won't understand the weight of what they did. And she's just like, that's not for you to bear. That's not for you to figure out. What is it doing to you? That's where healing and forgiveness comes in, is it's what is it doing internally to you? You can hold on to that anger forever. What is it holding you back from though? And I'm going to tell you, good relationship, a positive experience in life. You're going to be angry, depressed. You're going to have every health issue possible known to man. Your body is taking a toll of you being angry and resentful. Forgiveness does not mean relationship. And forgiveness does not mean that they don't suffer the consequence for what they did. And part of that consequence is not having a relationship with who they want to have a relationship with. Would hope that someone can say, let me work through what I can hold on to, because I would want them to have a better life. I want them to not have panic and anxiety and all these other things that come from trauma. They're all tied together. It is hard in that moment to say, am I willing to let go of that anger, because I don't know what the outcome will be if I do. But again, I think I always thought I was taught forgiveness was that I had to have a relationship with them. And that's not the truth. And once I was able to understand that, I was actually able to let go of what I felt I was responsible for too. And that was holding on to me more than what my parents did. I would sit back and be like, wow, I'm not responsible I was the child in the room. And that's something that when we can accept, we stop saying things like, I should have done better. I could have done better. I could have stopped them. I could have prevented it. It's like, I couldn't do anything. I was the kid. That's why it happened. Not because I was an adult. I was a child. And that is not my responsibility.
Well, I love that. And I appreciate, again, what you shared. And thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate all that you gave.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, that is it. That is all. That is our show today. Some of you know this, some of you don't. It's okay if you don't know. This last year, I've actually been a public address announcer at Eagle Point High School. That's right. They even made me a custom t-shirt. Can you believe this? It says Voice of the Eagles. I bring that up only because of this reason. Every sporting event that I'm at, I have to read this script, which some of you know I'm not a script guy. Never have been, probably never will be. So I've kind of memorized it, so I don't read it every time, but I haven't memorized. But it's something to the effect of, it says this: know your role. Be a parent, be a coach, let the coaches coach, be a parent, be the parent. Let the referees ref, let the players play. Be a fan, cheer loud, be excited, but know your role. That's the message in it, is know your role. And so it got me thinking, as I'm hearing her story unfold today, is what's your role? Do you know your role? There's so many times in life I feel like we just walk by and we just ignore and we just don't say anything and we just keep walking. That's not my problem. That's not my issue. That's not my cross to bear. So what is your role today? How do you play a part in someone's story? Are you the role model? Are you the role advocate? Are you the role prayer person? Are you the role hugger? What's your role? And if you don't know your role, let me help you find it. You can let me know that you don't know your role at opspodcast.com. It's a great place to let me know not only your role, but you can listen to past, present, and future episodes there. You can also let us know on the social medias at OPS Podcast Show under Facebook, Instagram, and X. And don't forget this before we go. It's so important. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do gain a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.